Big urban highways and highway-like roads were not built in a day, nor were they built just during the initial car booms. The constructions continued, more lanes were added, blocks of buildings destroyed, and overall the process that started in Central Europe in the 60s and 70s kept going. But in some cities, just carving into the city would not be enough. Other roads were already in the way, or there were simply terrain problems, so engineers needed to go underground. Let's take a look at maybe a little surprising history of car tunnels in Central Europe of the communist Eastern Bloc. And in the meantime, I will do a couple of things in our city of Altengrad. We will finish the second half of the urban highway, cut down old city blocks, but we will put the highway in open underground trench. And we will start another urban highway, which will go into a tunnel right below the castle in the city center. These two highways will be connected between each other and with the surface roads, with probably the most complicated interchange and intersections in the city so far, pushing the limits of nodes in city skylines. Well, anyway, let's talk about tunnels, and then I will explain the build more. Tunnels are obviously incredibly great. Vehicle goes in, disappears, and then respawns on the other side. Amazing. I'm sure everyone as kids put little tunnels over toy railways or racing circuits, and later built tunnels in Transport Tycoon or something. So I don't need to explain the significance of tunnels any further, do I? But what might be surprising about their history around here? Well, because there were actually not many built in our corner of Europe until around the 1990s. A comparison can be made with, for example, the United States, once again for these road infrastructure projects, where car tunnels were built left and right, already in the early 20th century. Building tunnels, of course, highly depends on the terrain, but you don't need to have exactly kilometers of height differences to need tunnels. And especially in the urban environment, there might be other motivations like vertical separation, as space simply ran out on the surface. Anyways, let's take a look at vast majority of car tunnels around here, since there really are just a few. I will also try to mention their architecture and just development over time, so we will go chronologically across the countries. Probably still the fanciest and oldest road tunnel of the region is in Budapest in Hungary. The Buda Castle Tunnel opened in 1857 with 350 meters of length, so it was also the longest for a very long time. It was built to continue the path established by the famous chain bridge, and to this day serves as an important car direction. What's worth mentioning on this one, and you can already see it clearly, is just the grandness of it, the attention to all the decorations. It certainly is a highly functional piece of infrastructure, like any tunnel, but back in the day, these objects were also a piece of art, in this case using some classical elements. The oldest car tunnel in Czechoslovakia, not even Czechoslovakia just yet, was built in Prague in 1904, but this time with much more modest length of only 34 meters. Although, once again, it was a crucial road connection through this awkward cliff extending into the river. It still is an important road and tram connection today. But just look at the decorations. It's 1904, but the architect decided to make it look like a castle, a medieval castle with little towers and everything. The reason for that is the ruins of Vyšehrad Castle just above the tunnel, to hint some continuation of this area. Still, a mere 34-meter tunnel, but this much attention was put into the details, and it remains to this day a little yet important landmark. In Poland, the first road tunnel, but probably more of an underpass, was built in 1907. Someone could probably call it a bridge as well, since it's simply a surface-level cut into the artificial railway embankment in the city of Białystok. So I'm just mentioning it in here because it is technically listed as the first road tunnel in Poland, although it's not quite on the same level as proper tunnels. Then there was a big pause once again until two new road tunnels opened in Czechoslovakia in 1937. Both are interesting in a way. The first is part of the Czech Dam, finished just a couple of years earlier. The tunnel is now a much more modest-looking concrete type, with just the entrance decorated with the classic stones, later somewhat ruined by the functional markings. You could argue that it's not the most important tunnel ever built, so the style reflects that. But if we look at the second tunnel from this year, it is this funny little 24-meter long tunnel on a fairly important road back in the day. The road bore the name of the Czechoslovak president. Nowadays, it's quite less significant. Anyways, it is the first ever non-urban road tunnel of the whole region, so that's kind of why I'm mentioning it. It is done using the more classical style, this time fully, with even decorative battlements on top. Most likely because of exactly the same reason as in Prague some 30 years ago. There is a medieval castle of the same name on top of the hill. Just to mention one really strange little tunnel in Hungary. This is actually not a tunnel, but a natural cave later turned into a road tunnel. It is in Lilleføret, it's only 12 meters long, and looking at this picture, it might seem the tunnel is completely pointless, right? You can just go around. But this picture from 1930 shows the cave already there, so later engineers decided to just straighten the road through it and reinforce the inside with a concrete arch. The Second World War did not favor construction in general. Or did it? Depends on the strategic importance of the project, and it just so happens that tunnels are very strategic. For example, acting as shelters. The Bratislava tunnel started to be built during the war in 1943. It was completed in 1949 with a serious length of 792 meters. So for a really long time, it became the longest tunnel in the region. Since the early 1980s, only trams are allowed in, as it does not have proper ventilation for cars, and it's too narrow to also safely fit pedestrians. The tunnel lining was still done with stone to form the almost Gothic-shaped arch, so due to the technology of the time, it just looks really nice. But the architect clearly, purposefully made the entrances look nice too. But I guess that would be the end of more artistic approaches to infrastructure, certainly when it comes to tunnels, since, well, most of the thing is hidden underground, so the only place to do decorations is at the entrances, and those certainly dropped the fanciness from now on. Now, since I already mentioned ventilations, tunnels from now on will need some kind of ventilation towers, because there are gonna be a lot of cars going through them. So that's another visible object where the architect can play with the form just a little. Bridges have a clear advantage in this case, so they can much better reflect the architectural trends of the time, so functionalism of the 20s and 30s, and later with larger bridges, some technicism and modernism. But even purely utilitarian bridges can be quite nice too, made of riveted truss beams, for example. You could argue, on the other hand, that the younger tunnels kind of need to look more utilitarian. If there is a 6-lane highway going through them, with the entrance next to a huge interchange, a classical tunnel portal like in Budapest would be a total waste for that location. In Budapest, the front of the tunnel is a heavy pedestrian area too, plus the portal is visible from multiple places in the very core of the city. Today's tunnels, especially in the urban environment, tend to be tools to hide traffic, to divert it, bypass more important places. So why build super fancy tunnel portals that would just scream, "Hey, look at me"? That is a totally different approach to bridges, of course, which is always going to be a huge structure over the river, so it probably should look somewhat pleasing. Whether or not some modern bridges actually are, especially urban highway ones, is questionable in my opinion. But anyways, I digress. Let's return to the tunnels. During the rebuilding of Warsaw after the war, it was decided to also make some changes for the future layout of a modern new city. So right under the heavily damaged old town, a new road tunnel was built as part of the East-West Avenue, continuing the new bridge. So actually a really similar situation to Budapest some 100 years earlier. The tunnel is relatively short with 196 meters, and it is the only proper road tunnel built in Poland in the entire 20th century. There are some really nice pictures online showing the construction process. Here we can see that it's the cut and cover type of tunnel, so built from above completely in an open trench, as opposed to the bored method of 4 deeper tunnels. Another, this time properly modern road tunnel opened in Prague in 1953 under Letná. This tunnel is once again forming a vital road artery back in the day and today. The tunnel entrance on the riverside is now a simple yet clean wall. Looking at this picture from 1954, it's just a plain concrete entrance, and then picture from today. Look at that. Greenery just fixes everything, just overgrows this concrete bare wall, and it looks actually really nice. It works like that in city skylines. You can just detail with greenery and be done with it. Surprisingly, it works in real life too. Since the tunnel is already somewhat long, with 423 meters, and since it's fairly modern, it is probably the first one of the region to be equipped with the ventilation towers, right from the beginning. They actually look rather good, these towers. They could have been much simpler and purely functional, but someone did pay attention to them and realized that it will stand in the middle of a park, let's put some more effort into it. The other end of the tunnel is unfortunately horrible. I actually used to live in a flat pretty much looking right into it. Not only is it just ugly, but it acts as a huge amplifier. Cars entering and going all the way through to the other side are really loud because of the trench, just reflecting all sound into the nearby buildings. A very similar looking tunnel opened in East Germany in 1959. Also as part of a new dam. So it's a non-urban tunnel, and just like in Poland, this is the first and only proper road tunnel in East Germany. Although this time not in the whole 20th century, but at least until the German reunification. Car booms of the 1960s and 70s meant the construction of various beefier traffic solutions, great separated intersections, interchanges, and so on. These grade separations are sometimes mentioned as tunnels in sources, but are they actually tunnels or just underpasses or something else? Let's just quickly browse through them at least. There is the Alexanderplatz tunnel in Berlin, bypassing the new huge surface intersections on top. From Alexanderplatz there goes a major avenue, which eventually forms an urban highway and goes through this place, where another grade separation was built in 1979, and technically it's also listed as a tunnel. In Poland, in Wrocław, and pretty much exactly the same thing. Bratislava, and an intersection with probably the wildest road markings, as you can see. Staying in Slovakia, in the mountains regions, there is the Stratena tunnel from 1972, measuring 326 meters. First non-urban road tunnel in Slovakia, and it's very similar to the previous 1950s tunnels. So once again, a simple concrete type with a utilitarian-looking flat fronts. Let's now return to Prague to look at, well, an underpass, sure, but I'm just mentioning it because it's kind of interesting. Looking at the place, the thing is not exactly needed, is it? The road could have been going without the roof, since it's literally just a parking lot above it. But what is this building? Or most importantly, what was this building? That used to be the headquarters of the Czechoslovak Communist Party. And they obviously could not have some stinky and loud 4-lane road below their windows, could they? No, that was for the ordinary people to enjoy, not them. Ironically, next to this place is the infamous North-South Avenue, carving into the downtown with its many cost-driven compromise solutions, which cause a lot of headaches today still. That was that for the opened tunnels before 1989 in Czechoslovakia, although a few others were started. Staying in Prague, there is the Strahov tunnel, which was and still is a massive project with 2,004 meters in length. The tunnel would form the only possible high-capacity connection on this side of the river, since there is the tall Strahov ridge in the way. And the narrow flatland close to the river is taken by Prague's oldest district. Sure, demolitions were kind of common in this time period, but the engineers were not that crazy to just demolish the oldest parts, the most significant parts of Prague. Anyway, the construction started in 1980 already, but it was constantly met with financial problems, and it eventually got a reputation as one example of a failed, somewhat megalomaniac project of a dying regime. Nevertheless, the tunnel was opened after long 17 years in 1997, and it's one of the most critical pieces of Prague's infrastructure today. Although even back in the day, there were already voices raising the question whether this project might just become part of the, today we would call it the one more lane meme. Interestingly, on the other hand, the tunnel was also called an environmental project, since it would heavily cut down on travel distance, thus saving fuel. Both of these aspects, environment and finely spoken concerns of just adding more lanes, will be the topic of some other videos, especially the environment we will touch soon in the 80s, because it was a surprisingly strong topic of the time, but let's just leave it at that for now. The tunnel, due to its length, needed ventilation, so once again ventilation towers were built for it, and once again they could have been built purely functional, but someone decided they should also have aesthetical qualities and work with the surrounding plaza. So it received this form of two concrete and glass towers with fountains below them. And just to have this list complete, another short Hungarian tunnel was opened in Pécs in 1987. But even though it was a relatively small project, it was also plagued by financial struggles, and the construction fell behind schedule, doubling the construction time from 2 to 4 years. Various decorative elements near the entrances were eventually cancelled due to lack of funds, although the tunnel does have an interesting concrete pattern lining it, and the almost non-existent entrances meant it was eventually overgrown to form that concrete-green combination, which I personally really like. Okay, so those were the road tunnels, not that many eventually in the region, but now it gets really interesting with railway tunnels because there are literally hundreds. So let's go over every single one in detail. Nah, I'm just kidding, don't worry. But seriously, just for comparison, in Czechia alone there were 151 railway tunnels, over 100 built in the 19th century. That's a lot. In Germany, in Saxony alone, 40 railway tunnels with 0 road tunnels. The first road tunnel there opened in 1992, after the reunification. The reason for that is purely technical, of course. Railways need certain maximum grade and minimum turning radii, which are much lower and higher, respectively, compared to roads. That was certainly true initially, but the differences started to diminish as road vehicles became faster, more numerous, and much more prioritized. So suddenly a road tunnel was nothing crazy anymore and could be considered not only for making a road possible, but to make a road more convenient. In the urban environment, a road tunnel was a solution fitting the idea of a vertically separated city. So just like a metro, a tunnel offers clear advantages. It removes noise and the physical obstacles that moving cars become in the city. But there is of course the tiny little problem of money, which the regimes, especially in the 1980s, did not really have. And like I already hinted, there is the very real danger of just creating the one more lane meme, if the tunnel project is not done hand in hand with some rethinking of road traffic above it, in places where the tunnel is supposed to divert traffic from. The disparity between road and railway numbers around here is also in the overall huge importance of railway transport in the Eastern Bloc compared to the West. I will repeat that one statistic between East and West Germany, how Western railways had double the length, but Eastern railways had double transported cargo weight at some point. Another thing that a tunnel requires is of course some traffic treatment at the entrances. The longer the tunnel, the higher traffic flow it will attract to its ends, since it will collect cars from a larger area, since it will be more convenient for drivers from a larger area. So the tunnel ends need to have some bigger intersections or an interchange. That is exactly the case in Prague with the Strahov tunnel today, especially on its northern end with the really crazy sunken interchange, also serving as an entrance to yet another younger tunnel and many surface roads. Terrain conditions are of course not the only reasons to consider a tunnel, although back in the day it was the number one by far. Even in the urban environment, since simply cutting down building blocks for more lanes on the surface was not really a problem. But things like bypassing other infrastructure, bypassing new city blocks, or older that the city wouldn't or couldn't demolish was also important, especially further into the future. But as we saw, it just wasn't done much in this part of Europe in this time period. Car numbers were lagging behind the West, so need for more lanes underneath was not as strong. Money was of course a problem, and city environment was just viewed differently. A big change is absolutely clear in the 1990s and early 2000s, when these countries kick-started tunnel construction. New tunnels appeared left and right, mostly on highways, new highways, but also inside cities, covering major avenues and so on, somewhat catching up with the car trends of the Western world of some decades before. But that will be a story for some other time. Now let's go look at the time-lapse. Okay, so let's first talk about the tunnel, because you could have seen me in the time-lapse here only build one part of it, one tunnel entrance, and it's actually a construction site too. So what's up with that? What am I trying to do here? Well, I'm trying to maybe replicate or imitate a little the real-life construction process of the Strahov tunnel that I showed you, that I talked about before. So started in the 80s and finished in later 1990s, after a really, really long time. This tunnel in Altengrad is going to be of similar scale. It's also like a megalomaniac, huge project, very huge project for car infrastructure. So it makes sense that it's just not going to be finished in one go. And that's actually very strategic for me, gameplay-wise, or Altengrad-wise, because I don't know where the tunnel is going to go. Yeah, I have to admit, I don't know where the tunnel is going to eventually go, because I had some solid plans. I was 100% convinced I'm going to just take it straight along the riverbank, kind of, and resurface it near the industrial zone, the big one. That was the original plan right from the start. Probably right from when I built the castle, right? Because when I built the castle, when I built the vineyard down next to the castle, I already knew that I am gonna do a car tunnel there. So I kept it a secret for maybe like 2-3 years. I don't know how long. And well, finally it's here. Yeah. So that's one of those projects that I already prepared for, kind of. But yeah, the second entrance, I just don't know right now, because when I was building for today's project, when I was actually putting all of this together, I started looking at the city, started planning, and then I realized, well, that actually doesn't make sense at all to have the tunnel go in that direction, because that's kind of where the original urban highway goes. Perhaps the reason is that I was not thinking of the urban highway before I started planning the tunnel. The urban highway is actually a product of some suggestions that I had on the live streams. At first, I did not really want to do it like that. I wanted to do the tunnel as like the rapid alternative to some kind of a more city avenue, not a disconnected highway. So yeah, that plan kind of fell apart. So right now I'm actually working with the idea of resurfacing the tunnel, actually taking it below the river and resurfacing it somewhere near the exhibition center, because that's going to make a lot of sense actually, because it's basically going to provide like a cut through the city into that huge new city expansion almost directly. So after the tunnel resurfaces, there will have to be some huge interchange, or maybe like an intersection only, but definitely some continuation of like a surface road into different parts of the city, and connections to some brand new highways as well going off the city in that direction. So yeah, possibilities are kind of out there, kind of open right now. I don't really have any other idea right now, but I'm not 100% convinced I'm gonna resurface it at the exhibition center. That part of the city is not prepared for it at all. I am usually preparing for these things. Obviously in real life they were not, because they had no clue when building, expanding the city in the 19th century. They obviously had no idea that 100 years from now there will be cars and car tunnels all around. Right, so that's the car tunnel. I did it as a construction site because it's just nice. It's just illustrating the process, and this was actually a very satisfying thing to put together. What was kind of painful though was the demolition of, well, everything in this episode. So first of all, I demolished this stripe of land to put this highway trench over here for the original highway, and then I deleted the ruins of the old bridge that was just like on the side a little. It definitely saw better days, but now with the highway it had to completely go. Together with that, like a slum area that was below that truss bridge. All of that needed to completely make way, not only for the highway, but for the construction site itself. Right, so that's actually a huge change. You will see that in the cinematics, in the transition. Right, now back to this original highway. So this original highway actually had to go into a trench over here because it had to go lower towards the river to cross it nicely and to actually just have a better elevation for some kind of an interchange between it and the brand new highway going into the tunnel. Now, by the way, the brand new highway on the other side is going to continue past the harbor and eventually it's just going to lead off the map. Right now, I only ended it at the interchange because, you know, the tunnel is not finished, so there's no point. Although with this original highway, you could have seen me there just with Network Multitool, plan it and build it all the way to the edge of the map. So this is the first finished highway in Altengrad, and I guess in the country the Altengrad is in. All right, and I just needed it gameplay wise because I really wanted to have some proper traffic finally. Otherwise, this highway was just like an urban road connecting different parts of the city, and the traffic was not ideal for what I would like to see in the cinematics, for example. So there is that. Right, that interchange there that's connecting these two highways together was kind of crazy. It was supposed to be a little more crazier. It was supposed to be completely grade separated everywhere, so all the ramps, all the connections, all the turns. But that proved to be just too much for this place because I am very limited by space. And at the same time, I explained it many times before, I kind of like doing these traffic solutions like fitting the actual traffic situation. And it's not like we need to have everything grade separated around here. So let's not. Let's actually build like an intersection, like a central intersection right there. So it's kind of like a design of a single point urban interchange, but you know, with just some extra steps, extra bypassing ramps and those kinds of things. It was actually kind of a product of like various, you know, iterations that I had with the viewers on the live stream too. Right, and also the intersection, I was heavily inspired by the Bratislava intersection, the one with the crazy markings. I was constantly looking at that, and as you could have seen there in the time lapse, that's a heavily distorted node with node controller, and I'm really glad that as opposed to Asturis, here I'm using node controller renewal because this is just so much easier with it. And I think it's actually the case of being only possible with node controller renewal because with NC2, it would be just a lot of headache. I would just have to control all the directions, orientations and everything. Yeah, I don't even want to think about it. But anyway, that intersection is done. It's completely functional, by the way. Cars are not slowing down. Unfortunately, it's kind of weird because City Skylines, for example, doesn't understand like you know, directions. So, for example, the car is going from the downtown, basically from down below, going up from this view. It's straight, but that slight turn left, that's still considered straight by the game, yeah, by Traffic Manager, for example. And with Traffic Manager, you don't have control over green light, red light phases for individual lanes. You only have control over directions, yeah. So if you have like two roads with the same direction, from you know, from the gameplay wise point of view, I guess. Then that's just it. There's nothing you can do about it. So hopefully that's going to be expanded in CS2. I also placed these 4 towers over here. Now, these are the Manhattan buildings from Wrocław in Poland. They were already built much earlier in real life, but they were just absolutely fitting in this place. By the way, this place has huge potential for future changes. There's that picture from one German city that I forgot the name of. I always thought it's Hamburg, but it's not Hamburg. It's something else. You probably saw it. It was like a very viral picture at one point with like a riverbank highway which got converted. It got covered by some like a park and like a pedestrian area. So yeah, maybe that could be an inspiration for this place. Because let's be absolutely honest, this place is disgusting, right? It's just terrible. Like, I love it on one hand because it's like technically nice. It's very nice. This view, oh yeah, this view I just really like. But yeah, living in those towers, not great. Living in those buildings, the old buildings around here, yeah, well, I'm not really sure which one is worse. So, thank you guys for watching this one. If you liked it, then please do all the usual things below the video, clicking, rating, subscribing, and huge thanks to channel members who are directly supporting this channel and me in what I'm doing in here. Greatly appreciate it, guys. Once again, thank you and goodbye.